It's like an old detective movie. I got the one light in my face and I feel like I'm about to spill the beans. The Sig P320 is the talk of the day. This is Mickey with CarryTrainer.com. Little preface, I am a firearms trainer. I travel around the country, as my friend Paul Sharp likes to say, teaching good people to be dangerous against bad people. We practice the art of the pistol and rifle and shotgun. As some of you have seen, if you've come to this video, currently the internet in this space, the gun community, is awash with people talking about the Sig P320. And in the last day or two, Sig coming out with a response basically saying, we've done nothing wrong, we make a great product, and anybody that says different is on a smear campaign. For those of you that are not up to speed, what is the claim? Well, there are many claims made online, both in verbal discussions, in written discussions, and in videos of Sig 320s going off without the trigger being depressed, in holsters and in other types of situations where the gun is loaded. If that is true, that is very concerning. I think in the history of firearms, these things have happened. Remington Corporation, which was at one point called Big Green, right? It was one of the biggest firearm makers on the planet, had an action in the 700 bolt action that people said that thing was just sitting there and it went off. And people said it can't happen. And there were people that were experts, and there were people that were shooters, and there were people that were just, common folk that bought a gun to do some plinking, and they said, I don't know what to believe, but that thing was sitting there and it just went off before I pressed the trigger. There is now enough people claiming this, that this has happened, people that have been shot by a loaded Sig P320, people that have said they've seen it, that now Sig has put out a press release, which you can go read, saying it's an outright lie. We make a great gun. We test the snot out of the gun, and anybody that says otherwise is lying, is basically the paraphrased version of that press release. So here's what I know. Personally, I'm not a fan of the 320, and it has nothing to do with any of this. I don't like to shoot it. It doesn't feel good in my hands, which has nothing to do with whether or not it goes off without pressing the trigger. Initially, it was a drop testing issue. It kind of evolved into, hey, some of these things are just going off. Now, we got to understand a little bit about how firearms are made, right? The striker-fired gun, we could pick the Glock, for example. As the Glock came onto the scene, and we've got millions of people that grew up shooting revolvers, carrying revolvers, 1911s, and firearms like that, maybe the high power or other single-action pistols, the double actions that started to come on the market, and the double singles. As this Glock comes to market, people are like, well, wait a minute, this thing's super unsafe. There's no external manual safety. There's no anything other than the trigger and trigger guard to keep the gun from going off. Well, wait a second. That's if you don't really take a bigger look. There's actually a lot of things happening, mechanisms inside of the slide framework that's been copied over and over again by other striker-fired makers that blocks the striker from moving without depressing the trigger. It's pretty ingenious, actually. It stops something like a strike to the back of the gun from sending the striker pin forward. It's cool. So part of that's an ignorance thing, right? I just don't know what I'm looking at. I can look at an engine and I kind of know what's there, right? Pistons and crankshaft and all those things, but it's not the same as being an engine builder or a master machinist or something where you really understand the minutia. And some of these things is a minutia thing. Here's what I know about Sig. So here's a personal example of something with Sig. And if you've watched our material, I've been doing this for over a decade online. I don't bash companies. I try to shoot straight. People don't pay us here on CarryTrainer to make review videos. I talk about stuff I want to talk about, which is maybe why we're not as popular as other channels, which is fine. I'm just not trying to chase likes and things like that. I talk about what I want to talk about. When the little 365 series pistol came out, I kind of am an early adopter of certain things. If I think it's cool, sure, I'll spend the money and I'll try it. People were like, oh, that thing's dumb. I bought 4 or 5 of them. We did some different things to them. Had different size. This is before all of the evolutions of them came out. I had some different grip frames. I had different texturing done on them. Changed some sights on some of them. I broke them all. I was running them in classes, both as an instructor and as a student, and I was taking them to classes like people like Scott Jedlinski or other high-speed shooting classes where other students were there running full-size guns trying to push the performance envelope. Gabe White is another guy. And I wanted to see what we could stretch out of those little guns. And when they broke, I wasn't mad at them because those guns were designed to be like a deep concealment, right? Micro compact, not meant for a guy to go shoot thousands of rounds in a weekend and beat the heck out of. And you might argue and say, well, they should stand up to that. No, your family minivan, it can pull a little landscape trailer around, but if you hook a camper trailer to your minivan, you're going to end up trashing the suspension, trashing the transmission, right? Just because it can do it doesn't mean it should. So I broke a bunch of those. I wasn't mad that they broke, but I was upset how it happened. At the time, we started to see strikers break, and I've done numerous videos on this here on the channel. You can go watch them. Strikers were breaking early on in the Sig P365, and I know this video is about the 320, and I'll get back to that. The striker thing became such an issue, it started popping up all over. And you had to send the gun back in. Sig had replaced the striker and send it back to you. Okay, fine. Well, then we started to see trigger bar return springs and other pistols. It might be called a trigger return spring, but in this pistol, it's called a trigger bar return spring. It allows the trigger to reset. It's a little tiny spring that costs pennies, maybe $5 or $10 to buy at retail. And when it breaks, you can't shoot the gun after one round. The trigger does not reset. Once it goes back, that's it. Those started to break. And it's a catastrophic failure in the moment. That's not a tap rack or feed a new magazine in. And then we started to see trigger bar. So if the trigger return spring breaks, I can reach down and I can pull the trigger forward. In the proverbial like dark parking lot fight, you're not going to be doing that. You're going to have to do something else. But you could mechanically pull that trigger forward without the spring doing it. Well, then we started to see the trigger bars themselves snap. And that little bar connects the trigger back to the works inside of the action of the pistol. When that breaks, that's it. You've got to take the gun apart. There is no firing another round. And there's issues there. People that saw this or heard me talk about this, well, what'd you do to the gun? Some of these weren't mine. At one of our S12 events, I think it was a year and a half ago, within 15 minutes, totally unrelated, 2 people, a man over here, a woman over there, they weren't, husband and wife or something where they bought the guns at the same time. They were on the firing line running the course of fire, and within minutes, just randomly, it was just a random thing, both their guns broke. One of them, the trigger bar snapped. One of them, the trigger bar return spring broke. And there's been other parts that have broken in those. We had a bunch of my guns in a box, so we cannibalized some parts off of them to get those guns up and running for the rest of class so they could order some. Therein lies the rest of the problem. You can't just go order these parts very easily. You couldn't at the time. Now there's some other companies. I know there's a few of you that are nerds about finding stuff. You might say, I know a guy or I know a guy. The problem is for the masses to go out and find those parts, it's hard. I know people, and it's hard for me to find them. I've got to scratch and fight. Can I please get a couple of these springs? They want you to send the gun back in so that they can fix it, so that they can inspect it, which is cool. If you're not handy to take apart 10 or 20 little pieces, don't do it. Send it in. But that's a big deal. If you don't have another firearm, if that's your gun to protect yourself, you're a single mom, you're a young dude, you don't have a bunch of guns to cannibalize parts off of, and that's the gun that you protect your family with, and you can't just get another part, that's a big deal. I had enough of those instances happen. My nephew, Kanan, who you guys see in videos, he's the guy that runs the day-to-day operations of Gunfighter Oil, good man. He carries a 365 XL, sexed up by Boresight Solutions. Great gun. I love to shoot it. Well, it had a catastrophic failure on the range, and he was running his carry gun, which is why if you do this stuff enough, most guys, including myself, will say, have a gun to train with, have an analog of it that you carry. That way you're not beating the snot out of your carry gun, which I do think makes sense if you can afford it. But when that thing broke, it took us about 3 months to get a spring, to get his gun back up and running. Thankfully, we had another gun we could give him, but I think that one was the trigger bar on that last failure. The way that stuff was handled by the manufacturer, as all of that stuff happened, several was at 5, 6, 7 years ago, people were crying, saying this is a quality control issue. Never once did the company come out and say, we've got an issue, let's get these things back in, let's fix them. They just fix them as they break. And let's be honest, if you're part of a management team of a huge company, you've got a real big decision to make. Do we admit to possibly having a design, engineering, production flaw, QC flaw, wherever, the blame lies, and risk hurting yourself financially, losing customers, etc.? Or do you wait until these things come in and hope it just stays a small problem? And that's the gamble that they took. As a consumer, I would rather you say, hey man, I messed up. I got to fix this. Here's a story. Recently, while traveling, when I'm out of town, I pay a guy to plow the snow at home so that it's not piled up. Got cameras. I had recently replaced the garage doors, the roll-up garage doors at the house. We heat the garage because we do some stuff out there. And they're nice doors. Spent a lot of money on them. Well, get home and the doors are all smashed up. One of the 20-foot wide overhead garage doors. Well, what the heck? I look on the cameras and there's the plow truck that smashed into the house. So, of course, I call him and we work it out. Well, I'm going to pay for it, he says. Yeah, man, but I had to call you and ask you about it. Like, you didn't think I'd notice a smashed up, brand new, 6-month-old door? That's the same kind of a situation. It would have been a lot cooler if you just texted, got a problem, here's what happened, I'm going to take care of it, I'm very sorry it happened. I would have looked at that situation and said, hey, this is, we've all can make mistakes. And I would have continued working with him. After almost 20 years of working with this guy, if you hit my house, damage my stuff, don't tell me, hope I won't see it, I can't have you at my house anymore. And that's how I feel about this whole situation. I personally have never seen one of these guns go off, and I teach thousands of people, and we saw a lot more of these guns a few years ago. We do not see as many of them. I think as people have got turned off to them, they've gone to other makers, which is fine. I don't care about that. I've got no horse in that race. I've not seen one go off. I have very close friends. When I say close friends, I don't mean like a guy I know on the internet. I mean very close friends that I know would not lie to me. One of them is a national level shooter. He's a really great instructor. He had one of his own guns do it, his own gun. So it wasn't a second or third hand story. It was him, gun was in his hand, finger off the trigger. Now, if this stuff happened once or twice to kind of go backtrack, I'd be like, okay, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe it's just a person being on the trigger. But when it's over and over and over and over, you got to start to look and say, where's the commonality here, right? I've heard people argue and say, well, this stuff happens with other guns. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't happen with other guns. Are there other firearms that have gone off because something was manipulated? Sure. Are there other guns like the Remington that had a failure in engineering or QC or production? Yes. Are there other that have a system-wide problem like this? Not that I know of. I have not, and we're talking modern times here, I have not seen it. Many of the issues that we see where firearms are going off when they shouldn't, malformed holsters, improper training, improper trigger finger discipline, or something else is interacting with the trigger, and or manipulation of the gun with files or parts, and you don't know what you're doing. If you're not a gunsmith, don't mess with these things, or if you're not an armorer trained to do it, you're risking life. It's wrap this baby up. I personally think that this is only going to magnify. More people are paying attention to it. Now more people are going to be looking for problems. It's going to have to be dealt with. If you have one of these pistols, Sig came out a long time ago and said you can send it in for a voluntary upgrade. Voluntary upgrade was the air quotes there. They're not calling it a recall, but you can send it in and have them look it over. I don't know what they're doing to it. I don't know what that means. But if I had one, if I had to carry one, if my department issued it to me and they told me I had to carry it, I would be looking at it and having it sent in. There are agencies, some statewide, that have banned them. When I say agencies, I'm talking law enforcement. So there is a statewide law enforcement agency on the West Coast that said no more. These are not allowed here. I know instructors that have seen or heard enough that are saying these are not allowed in my class. I have heard of some matches saying these are not allowed in our matches. That tells you something. Now, I think one more thing to add is people can get onto an idiot train where they don't have facts, and if everybody else is jumping off the bridge, if all the lemmings are running in the sea, they're going to follow because they don't want to look stupid because they're not doing what everybody else is doing. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm saying use your judgment. Look at the facts that's out there. Don't look at the Reddit thread where some guy said, I heard from a dude who saw a guy who read a thing, who watched a video, blah, blah, blah. Go look at the reports. There is video footage out there. There are written reports. There are investigations. There are lawsuits. It's interesting, and I think it's going to continue to get more interesting. Kind of a rarity for me to talk about these kinds of things in this setting. I thought I'd do it, not because I have anything to hide or to gain or to lose by it. I just have other stuff to do, and this is often something I just let other guys do it, have these conversations, but enough people are asking about it. So my takeaway, dig a little deeper. Brand loyalty is great until you get shot in the leg or somebody else gets shot. You know, you're sitting down with a holster. Where's that thing pointed? You're sitting down in an appendix carry. Where's that thing pointed? Think about what you're doing. Look at the big picture. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Be well. Bye now.
Adventure doesn't wait. It demands fuel. Fresh and energizing. Crafted for the untamed. For those who chase the light, Ignis Lux is the fire that keeps you going. Ignis Lux Coffee. Fire in your cup. Light in your soul.